The 90s, a decade when the NBA went global and generational legends were born. It was the era where footwork became an art form and dominance became routine. Trash talk was at an all-time high, and the entertainment was even higher. Everyone has a soft spot for the 90s, and for hoop fans, it doesn't get more iconic. But when you rewind the tape on that legendary decade, who really ran the 90s? Who were the true icons of this golden era? And who stood above the rest? These are the greatest players of the 1990s. To kick it off at number 10, it's Shaquille O'Neal. Shaq in the 90s may not have been the full-blown unstoppable force of nature we saw with the Lakers, but he was still one of the most dominant players of the decade. When Shaq entered the NBA, it was like watching Wilt Chamberlain reborn, yet somehow even more terrifying. At 7'1", over 300 pounds, and freakishly quick for his size, he was a nightmare matchup from day one. And when he decided to take over, there was no stopping him. The Big Diesel was a brutally efficient scoring machine, leading the league in field goal percentage 4 times in the 90s while putting up 27 points a game. He wasn't just about getting buckets, though. He was a dominant rebounder, a serious shot blocker, and his sheer presence in the paint forced teams to rethink how they played. The real highlight of Shaq's 90s run, leading the Orlando Magic to their first ever NBA Finals in just his 3rd season. That wasn't just greatness, that was the OG Superman announcing his arrival. Next up at number 9 is Dikembe Mutombo. Mutombo was a defensive nightmare. He didn't just block shots, he erased them from existence. He led the league in blocks 3 times during the decade and finished with the 3rd most blocks in the entire 90s. That man was so immovable, they started calling him Mount Mutombo. Very few players in NBA history have controlled and dominated the game defensively like Dikembe. In a decade packed with offensive juggernauts, he made his mark by stopping them in their tracks. While others were chasing scoring titles, Mutombo built his legacy by making sure they never got close. And by the end of the decade, Dikembe Mutombo had won 3 Defensive Player of the Year awards and cemented himself as not just one of the best defenders of the 90s, but one of the best defenders of all time. And next up at the 8th best player from the 90s is John Stockton. John Stockton was the definition of consistency and control in the 90s. When it came to the pure point guard position, no one, and I mean no one, played it better than 90s Stock. He wasn't just a good floor general. He wasn't just great. He was a god. And his records speak for themselves. The man led the NBA in assists 7 straight times in the 90s. He also finished the decade with the most assists and steals by any player. But it wasn't just about the records, because John Stockton was the engine that kept the Jazz running. Night in and night out, he was the definition of consistency and reliability. He didn't just rack up stats, he led, he organized, and he delivered. That's why Utah made back-to-back finals appearances with him at the helm. And let's be real, if they had faced anyone other than peak Jordan and the Bulls, Stockton might be sitting on 2 chips right now. Simply put, John Stockton was the best point guard in the 90s, and it's not even close. Now at the 7th spot is Dennis Rodman. The man, the myth, the menace. Off the court, Rodman might have been a certified weirdo, but on the court, he was always locked in. The entire decade was dominated by high flyers and offensive weapons, but Rodman carved out his legacy by doing the things that didn't show up on highlight reels, but absolutely won games. Rodman led the league in rebounding 7 seasons in a row, second most of all time, only behind Wilt Chamberlain. And he ended the decade with the most rebounds. Second place isn't even close. And he did all this while being just 6'7". He wasn't just a rebounding maestro, he was also one of the best defenders of the 90s. He could guard everyone, and I mean everyone on the court. The man was a winner through and through. Rodman won 5 championships, and in every single championship run, he played a massively crucial role. He was the energy, the edge, the one who did everything the others wouldn't or couldn't, which made him not just one of the best players of the 90s, but also one of the most important. His accolades are stupid over the years and show that he clearly was one of the best. Dennis the Menace chased impact no matter the play or day, and he caught it every single night. Moving into the 6th best hooper from the 90s, Rodman's teammate, Scottie Pippen. Scottie Pippen was the ultimate do-it-all player of the 90s and one of the biggest reasons the Bulls dynasty was even possible. He was a 6'8" forward who could guard all 5 positions, run the offense, and still clamp down the opposing team's best scorer. He was basically years ahead of his time, positionless before it even became a concept. But he wasn't just a sidekick to MJ. On any other team, Pippen would have been the franchise player. He was that good. In fact, when Jordan left the Bulls to go play baseball, Pippen didn't fold. He carried the Bulls to 55 wins and finished 3rd in MVP voting in 1994. 3rd. When Mike did come back, they continued their run as the most iconic duo in basketball history. Scottie Pippen was the perfect mix of talent, versatility, and unselfishness. He made winning plays, he made teammates better, and he was the backbone that made the Bulls unbeatable. And on the topic of winning championships, if it weren't for the Bulls, this man would have had at least 3. Charles Barkley. When you're talking pound-for-pound GOATs, Chuck is carved right into that Mount Rushmore. No question about it. Charles Barkley played the power forward position standing at just about 6'4", but that didn't stop him from bullying big men twice his size. The round mound rebounded like a center, scored like a guard, and talked trash like it was a second language. In an era stacked with Hall of Fame bigs, Sir Charles stood out as one of the best despite his size. But it was in 1993 that Barkley proved he was a problem. He won the MVP award, averaged 25 points, 12 rebounds, and led the Phoenix Suns to a record 62 wins at the time. When the playoffs rolled around, he turned it up even more, carrying the Suns all the way to the finals and going toe-to-toe with Jordan and the Bulls. Obviously, you know how that panned out. Even though Chuck never won a championship, he solidified his legacy as one of the toughest, most fearless, and most electrifying players of the entire decade. Speaking of a tough and fearless player, at number 4, I got Karl Malone. The mailman was a walking embodiment of reliability and dominance. Throughout the 90s, he played nearly every game, rarely missed time, and still averaged 27 points and 11 boards and won 2 MVPs in the Jordan era. Malone's game might have not been as flashy or special like other players in the 90s, but what he had was power and precision, and he used it well. Running through the court like a freight train, bullying players in the post, Malone was a beast. And when it came to the playoffs, he was still a beast. The Jazz were contenders for almost the entire decade, mainly because the milkman kept them in the fight. Even when facing the Bulls in back-to-back NBA Finals, he held his own against peak Jordan-era squads. Even Michael Jordan admitted Malone's Jazz were the toughest team he ever faced in the finals. In terms of stats, the mailman was one of the most productive players in the 90s, finishing the decade with the most points and second most rebounds. That's why Karl Malone was known as the mailman. He always delivered. And a man who delivered even more power is the 3rd best player from the 90s, David Robinson. David Robinson was the perfect blend of size, skill, and smarts. The man was a 7-foot athlete with the agility of a guard and the discipline of a Navy officer. Literally. He wasn't just a dominant big man, he was the dominant big man for most of the 90s. The Admiral was excellent at everything. Scoring? Robinson was a machine. He averaged 25 points a game throughout the 90s, dropped the only 70-point game of the entire decade, and finished with the 4th most total points. Defense? Straight up nightmare fuel. He once had 12 blocks in a single game. By the end of the decade, he ranked 2nd in total blocks. But what really set him apart was his all-around game. Robinson is one of just 3 players in NBA history to win titles in more than 3 different stat categories. And get this, he's one of only 4 players to ever record a quadruple-double. A 30-point quadruple-double. Bro, you can't even do that in 2K. To top it off, he went ahead to win the MVP award in '95 and rounded out the decade with a chip. The Admiral was elite on both ends of the floor, a natural leader, and remains one of the most respected players the NBA has ever seen. Now, before I get into the 2 greatest players from the 90s, we need to talk about some honorable mentions. First up is Alonzo Mourning. Alonzo Mourning was one of the most dominant defensive forces of the 90s. He was relentless with his shot blocking and physical play style. Offensively, he averaged around 20 points and 10 rebounds per game and consistently led his teams to the playoffs. Zoe brought toughness, passion, and elite two-way play every single night. Next honorable mention is Gary Payton. GP was a defensive nightmare and the only point guard to win Defensive Player of the Year in the 90s. Nicknamed the Glove for a reason. He locked down the league's best guards while still dropping buckets and running the offense. He led the Seattle Supersonics to one of the best records of the decade and even gave Jordan's Bulls a tough fight in the '96 finals. Elite defense, trash talk, and all-around impact. That was GP in the 90s. And my last honorable mention is Clyde the Glide. Clyde Drexler was one of the most complete guards of the 90s. A high-flying scorer, elite playmaker, and strong rebounder all in one. He led the Blazers to 2 finals appearances and later helped the Rockets win a championship in '95. Whether it was slashing to the rim or running the break, Drexler brought smooth athleticism and consistent production throughout the decade. He was the closest thing to Michael Jordan at the time. And speaking of MJ, he's the 2nd greatest player from the 1990s. Yeah, right. The 2nd greatest is Hakeem the Dream. When people look back and say picking you in the draft over Michael Jordan wasn't a mistake, you know, you were something special. If there was such a thing like a perfect center, it would be Hakeem Olajuwon. Offensively, he had one of the smoothest, most unguardable post games the league has ever seen. The Dream Shake alone sent defenders into retirement. Hakeem averaged 24 points and 11 rebounds during the 90s, which helped him finish the decade with the 6th most points and 3rd most rebounds. Defensively, forget about it. He led the entire decade in blocks and even finished 7th in total steals. Yeah, as a center. But if the stats somehow don't impress you, then the accolades definitely will. Back-to-back championships, back-to-back finals MVPs, an MVP award, all-star, defensive juggernaut. The Dream was, and always will be, the blueprint for elite two-way players and the king of icy footwork. Now, for the true, undisputed king of the 1990s, the man whose team dominated every single year, he has 2 teammates on this list. Of course, it's Michael Jeffrey Jordan. Do we really need a segment? It's MJ. He's the face of basketball, greatness personified, and the reason half the league wears the number 23. Everybody else on this list dominated the decade. MJ owned it. Think of the best qualities of every other player on this list, and Jumpman had it. Scoring, 7 scoring titles. Automatic. Defense, Defensive Player of the Year as a shooting guard, one of only 4 ever, plus the most all-defensive first-team nods in the 90s. Lockdown. Dominance, 4 MVPs, 6 rings, undefeated in the finals. Clutch? The 90s might have produced iconic legends and all-time greats, but it also produced the GOAT. Michael Jordan was so legendary at basketball that it would take an entire video just to scratch the surface of why he really is the GOAT.
And that's exactly what I did. Check it out here. Link is in the description. Not gonna lie with you guys, it's a movie.
But for now, let's be real. MJ is the greatest to ever do it. And if you somehow still need convincing, just look at the freaking accolades.